the President of the United States and our Senate Minority Leader, Mitch McConnell, have done a great job. As I hear the talking heads and the pundits and the different people talking about this compromise, this way forward, I am sure of it, because no one is completely happy with it. People who think that we should have a death tax are not happy with this bill. People who think, as I do, that the unemployment goes too far and isn't paid for and should have been are on the other side. But we are now faced with a choice. Are we going to allow the taxes for every single individual in our country who pays taxes to go up on January the 1st? Now, we could talk all day about how we should have addressed this much earlier. Yes, that's true. But we are where we are. It is now mid-December, and it is long past time when we should have told the American people, every family, every business in this country, what the tax policy is going to be for 2 years. Madam President, I have to tell you that I come from a business background. I wish more of my colleagues had had real business experience, because sometimes when I hear the academics and the talking heads and people talk about what we ought to do, some say, well, let's just wait. We can do this better next year. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Have you ever been in the real world trying to make a decision about whether you can add one more piece of machinery to your factory floor and hire people to run it or not? Because you're not going to make the decision if you don't know what your commitments are going to be in taxes and in this health care bill that is looming before every business in this country. Now, not only did I come from a business background, but I do talk to people in business throughout my state. And they are not hiring. They are not hiring. 2/3 of the jobs in this country are created by small business. And that is exactly what we should all hope for. We don't want jobs to be created in the government sector. That's a cost that you can't recoup. We need to cut down on the government sector jobs and make sure that people in the private sector are working, because that is how you build a strong and vibrant economy. And 2/3 of those jobs are small business, and small business people are operating generally at low margins. And they're not hiring people when they know that this health care bill, that they're seeing all kinds of estimates on the cost of that to them, and their taxes are going to go up next year. At every level, taxes will go up if we don't pass this bill this year. Capital gains and dividends are going to go up. Seniors who have saved their lifetimes to be able to retire, and they know they can't live on Social Security. Social Security was never meant to be a complete retirement plan. It was meant to be a cushion, a help with your savings that would allow you to have a standard of living. You talk to a senior today who has saved and they're not earning 1 penny on their savings, and they certainly are not going to do well if we raise the tax on capital gains and dividends. What are we thinking? To raise taxes on capital gains and dividends, that is the level that allows many seniors to live at a decent standard? What about the tax rates? Every person who pays taxes is going to have an increase January 1, because they're going to go into a higher bracket, a higher level at each bracket. Now, if we do that, Let's go back to small business. NFIB, the National Federation of Independent Business, which is the largest small business organization in America, says that 75% of the small businesses in this country are taxed at individual rates. So if their taxes go up, that is going to be the barrier to their being able to plan for the future and hire. What people in business want is predictability and stability. That's why having at least 2 years is so very important. And doing it now so they can plan for next year is so very important, because they're looking for predictability. Now, if I had written this bill with nobody else's opinions on this floor, I would have made them permanent, because I know that small business would much rather have the idea for 10 years of what's going to happen, or at least 5 years. But I didn't get to write it by myself. Neither did Senator McConnell, and neither did the president. But had we written it, we would have made them permanent. We have all sponsored the bills to make the tax cuts permanent, because we want jobs to be created in the private sector, because those are the good jobs of the future that can be sustainable and grow our economy. If we allow these tax cuts to go up, the marriage penalty is going to come back. Now, the marriage penalty is my amendment that finally was put in to the tax cuts of 2001 and 2003. My amendment was to relieve the marriage tax that people pay. A policeman and a school teacher get married, and they go into a higher bracket just because they got married, not because they increased their incomes. And that is wrong. Two school teachers get married, they go into a higher bracket. But the marriage penalty relief bill that I passed relieves them to the greatest extent. It doubles the standard deduction instead of paring it back. And that's what we need to have. What about the AMT? The AMT relief in this bill goes to the very lowest income earners in this country. If we don't pass this bill, 21 million American taxpayers will have to pay an alternative minimum tax because the government says they're not paying enough. Now, I think it's a fair question. At what point does the AMT kick in? Today, the AMT kicks in for a single person who makes $33,000. A married couple that makes $45,000. If we don't pass this bill through this Congress and let the president sign it, a married couple making $45,000 will have to pay the alternative minimum tax. Our bill gives relief. The bill that is on the floor gives relief so that it would go up to a married couple making $72,000, not to have the alternative minimum tax kick in. A single payer at $47,000. So the bottom line is, if we think that a single person making $33,000 ought to have to pay the alternative minimum tax, then I can't explain it to you. If you think that, I can't explain it to you. I don't. I don't think that single person making $33,000 should be subject to an alternative minimum tax because you're not paying enough tax. The AMT relief in the bill will bump it up to a level that is more reasonable, $47,500 for a single person and $72,000 for a married couple. The estate tax relief, I think that was a significant advance for the real world. Again, for small business people, farmers and ranchers. If you have the $1 million exemption, you will force farmers and small business people whose equipment is valued at more than it can produce What happens is the heirs to that estate will have to sell the equipment or the business or part of the farm or all of the farm to pay taxes to the government. And the irony is the money in an inheritance tax is money that has been taxed and taxed and taxed again. People pay taxes on their earnings. People pay taxes on their profits in a business. They pay taxes when they earn on their earnings. The death tax it does not make sense in the American dream, because we have always said this is a country where you can work hard and give your children the fruits of your labor. But because of the death tax, family businesses are cut by 50% in this country because the heirs have to sell the business to pay the taxes. That doesn't just affect the family, it affects the people who work for that family business. I want to keep the American dream alive, and I think the inheritance tax should be done away with completely, because it is not money that's never been taxed. It has been taxed in our system again and again and again. Every time something is earned on earnings, you pay a tax. So there is no policy reason for a death tax. I didn't get to write the bill by myself, and neither did Senator McConnell. We'd have made it permanent. But it's not going to be permanent, and it's not going to go away. It is going to be a 2-year extension with a $5 million exemption and a 35% rate after that. I think at least if we can allow people to plan for their estates, I hope that we can make it permanent so that people will be able to plan into the far future so that their small business, their farm, their ranch will be able to be held by their heirs and keep the jobs that those family-owned businesses have produced. So I just think it is important, when we get down to the bottom line, do we pass this bill or not? There are alternatives. We could say, you know what, I want to write it differently. Let's wait till next year. First of all, if we do that and we open up what I think is a very balanced approach, then we're going to talk about this a whole lot longer than about a week next year. It's going to take a while, and in the meantime, people are not going to be hired because small business won't know what their tax liabilities are going to be, and we will not have this settled for at least 2 years so that we can work on long-term tax reform. I thought the commission that just reported had some very good ideas for tax reform, where everyone would pay more of a flat tax. It would be slightly higher at the higher levels, but it would bring in more and it would lower the tax on everyone and bring in more because it would be simpler and more fair. I think we ought to look at that. We may need to make changes in one way or another, but it was a good starting place. But if we wait until next year to pass a bill, we are going to throw this economy into upheaval. And we will certainly not create the jobs that is the motivation behind this agreement. The president and the Republicans agree on one thing, and that is the goal should be to spur the economy and create jobs. How we get there, we have differences. But at least there are some parts on both ends that will have the effect of giving stability and predictability to the small businesses in our country that create 2/3 of the jobs so that they can start hiring. And that should be the dispositive part of the decision that we all need to make to vote for this bill. You'd have written it differently, Mr. President. I'd have written it differently. The President would have written it differently, and so would Senator McConnell if we were the King and Queen of America. Fortunately, we're in a democracy, not a monarchy, so we can't have everything exactly the way we want it. This is a good start. And let me end by suggesting that once we make this decision, and I hope that we will make the decision to move forward, I hope the House will join us, then we will not have to discuss tax cuts for 2 years. People will know what they are going to owe for 2 years, and they will be able to start making plans on that. But the argument that is being made that this is going to create more in the deficit does need to be addressed. And once this bill is passed, we must get about the business of cutting overall spending in this government. And that is not just the discretionary part, which is a minor part of our budget. It is also the entitlements. What can we do to make the entitlements not continue to grow beyond the capability to pay for it in a reasonable economy? We must get the debt down, we must get the deficit down, and we will be able to concentrate on that if we have put the tax cuts to bed. One of the things that we need to address is the implementation of this health care bill, which is the other factor in jobs not being created right now. I hope that we can repeal what we have passed and start all over so that the business people know that what we've passed is not going to work. It's going to be in the courts for a long time because of the constitutional issues. And let's go about the planning for a health care reform that doesn't put the fines and the penalties on business and individuals. Let's give them options so that affordable health care is there for them. We don't have to do that with a hammer. We can do it with options that are incentives for people to get health care because it will be affordable, and let them make choices for what fits their family, not a big government prescribed one-size-fits-all. And let's start getting serious about a bipartisan effort to cut the spending and cut the debt and cut the deficits. And let's set some parameters around extending unemployment so that more people will be hired, and we will set standards that are reasonable for people to start giving back to the community if they are able-bodied and have been unemployed for 2 years and more. If we are creative and we work together, we can do this. But tearing this package apart and saying, well, I want it all my way, means we are not going to have the stability and predictability that will create jobs starting next year. And that is our stated goal on both sides. I hope the members of the House will realize that anything that we do next year is going to have to be with a democratically controlled Senate, a Republican-controlled House, and that means that everything is not going to be our way. I wouldn't have written this agreement exactly this way, neither would Senator McConnell. I'm sure the President wouldn't either. But Senator McConnell and the President have done what leaders need to do. They have come together on a bill that will move this country forward, and it will not increase taxes on anyone that is paying taxes today. How can anyone believe that it will be good for the economy of our country to raise taxes in a recession. So I'm sure we're going to hear a lot of debate on this floor about what different individual senators would have done differently. But the bottom line is this Senate will overwhelmingly pass this package. I just hope that when all the debate is finished, that this bill will be signed by the President, and we will move forward in a joint effort to reduce the debt of this country as adult leaders should do. That should be our goal for the next 2 years as we now have settled the tax cut issue. Hopefully, we will go with a vengeance against the debt. And with tax reform and some reform in the entitlement programs, we can do it. Won't be easy, but it can be done. And that's why we ran for these offices, to be the leaders when our country needs leadership. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Okaka.